Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be talking about the astrology of 2026. So, as I am recording this, I'm actually doing this on the 24th of November 2025, and I'm just sat here thinking about how the year has been. And certainly for me, it's felt like 2025 has been really muddly. And I've constantly felt like I can't get ahead. I can't get to the things that I need to do. Much of the year has been taken up with renovations of one kind or another. First, there was the door debacle that we like to call it, which was the replacement of our front doors. All of us in the entire estate had this work done, which meant that there was constant banging and hammering. My door and my neighbour's door was all done incorrectly by cowboys, so they had to do it again. And then they were doing stuff in the attic, and then they were doing stuff to the doors downstairs. Then they were doing all of the fencing in the areas. There was just one thing after another after another. Oh, then I had to have my sort of bathroom. There was refitting going on there with the soil stack, and then that cut the gas off, and so I had more works done there. Everything this year has been about fixing things. And I was thinking just before I sort of pressed play, it's really kind of descriptive of the astrology of 2025, because we are in this finishing up, fixing up, getting ready modes, because 2026 is a year of all change. I know we said 2025 is all change because a lot of planets started to move into the next sign along, but it's not quite completed yet. For example, Saturn and Neptune are now back in Pisces. You see them here on the screen at the beginning of 2026, finishing up the job. But very, very soon, Saturn and Neptune are going to change signs. And across this year, we will see not only Saturn and Neptune changing signs, but also Uranus, Chiron, the nodes. Jupiter will also change signs as well. That's more usual because Jupiter changes signs roughly each year. But all these movements, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Chiron, the nodes, everything moving into new signs means everything moving into new stories, a new season of our lives, a new chapter of the world book, and of course a new chapter in our own story as well. So this sense of finishing up, shoring up, putting the last things in place, getting everything prepared, getting everything ready, it feels like that's what 2025 was about. Let's get ready, because this new story is starting in earnest this coming year. So the first major aspect of 2026 is one that we're actually familiar with already. It is Saturn sextile to Uranus. This is on the 20th of January. And it's actually the last sextile between these two. We had one in April and another in August in 2025. So this is another connection that speaks about finalization. We've had an ongoing story here that's been talking about slow progress. So slow Saturn, progress Uranus. Saturn in Pisces has been speaking about chasing away our inner saboteur, dealing with our collective shadow. It's also been talking about how we use our imagination, whether we have it working for us or against us. It's been talking about manifesting our dreams, because again, our imagination, Pisces, our imagination needs a place to go. We have to do something with it with Saturn, because Saturn likes to accomplish things out there in the real world. So we've been working really hard on this, and then Uranus in Taurus has been working on revolutionizing our finances, our resources, freeing us up so that we can feel more secure in all different kinds of ways. So now these two energies are working really well together. The more we get a handle on, the more we master our imagination, our spirituality, our unconscious, rather than letting it run away with us and rule the roost, the more we manage that, then the easier it is to deal with the unpredictable nature of life, Uranus. The easier it is to revolutionize things, to innovate, to try things out, to experiment, because we feel safe enough to do it. Then following this, on the 26th of January, this is when things start to get really busy. Things are picking up now because Neptune is going to move into Aries. I should say as well that all these aspects, everything that is coming up in this reading, I will be going over again in the months ahead readings. So I will go a little deeper each time. And then the weekly forecast that is available for my patrons and also Substack members, again, we go a little deeper. So there's lots of layers to these transits. And the purpose of this video is to really give an overview so that you have a sense of how things are unfolding in the year ahead and the major things that are happening. So Neptune going into Aries, we already had a preview of this in 2025 between the 30th of March and the 22nd of October 2025. This is when Neptune first stepped into Aries. So it might be useful just to think about what was going on around that time for you in your life. What were the themes that were coming up? If you know which house Neptune is traveling through in your own chart, what was coming up in that area of life? Because these stories are going to be more prominent as Neptune moves into Aries for the long term on this date. So Neptune's going to be in Aries right up until the 22nd of May, 2038. And that's when it will start to move into Taurus. It won't properly leave Aries, though, until the 23rd of March, 2039. So we have a long period of time, around 14 years of Neptune being in our Aries house, so our individual house, and then we have Neptune in Aries for the collective. Aries, hot and fiery energy. It's ruled by Mars, so we think of Aries as being very direct. It can be confrontational. It's battle ready. It's the type of energy that we can use to cheer each other on. It's positive, it's can-do, and it's go-getting. And so with Neptune coming into this sign, these are the attributes that are likely to be idealized during this time. This is very much a time of the hero or warrior archetype with Neptune going into Aries. But Neptune ideally spiritualizes what it touches. So yes, this could be a story about spiritual warriors as well. Certainly because Aries is the first of all the signs, and this is a brand new cycle for Neptune going through the zodiac. We might even see some kind of new spirituality, some new belief system. So whether that's spiritual or otherwise, a new belief system that is starting to seed itself in the collective psyche. But as Aries is also to do with the head, the face, and identity, there could be a lot of confusion around this as well. We're going to be talking a lot more about these issues, but I just want to kind of mention that I've noticed that there's a lot more facial recognition and sort of technology being used. Certainly over in the UK, it's starting to appear in supermarkets. It's starting to be used more by the police. And so, yes, everybody's face is everywhere with Neptune in Aries, but then you can have confusion. So what happens when people are misidentified? All this kind of thing is coming into being. And then we've also got the idea of the idealized, stylized image that is not necessarily real with Neptune as well. So again, there's more conversation to have about this, but just notice, where is Neptune moving in your own chart? Because the very best expression here is to use your spirituality to transcend whatever the troubles are, to give you the courage, to give you the energy, the vigor, the drive, the will, to realize that actually you can stretch yourself. Neptune has no walls. It kind of speaks of things that are immortal and go on forever. So there's a huge amount that you can achieve, but there's also a need to sort of touch base with reality at the same time. Thankfully, the universe knows this, and it's also sending Saturn along to keep Neptune in check for a little bit whilst we get used to this energy. So 14th of February, that is when Saturn enters Aries. Again, we've already had a little preview of this energy from the 25th of May to the 1st of September 2025. Saturn was in Aries, but now Saturn is in it for the long term. So in Saturn terms, that's about 2.5 years, up until the 13th of April 2028. Saturn will be in your Aries house. So wherever Saturn moves, he brings the instruction that we have something that we need to master in this area of life, because there's been some kind of restriction, some kind of conditioning. There's a sense that you've grown a little too small here. Maybe you've tried to be too careful here. You've been holding yourself back here. You've been doubting yourself here. So Saturn comes along, and the first thing we might experience is this sense of restriction, because he brings it up close and personal. He helps us to realize where we are not growing for some reason. And so this is why we can sometimes feel like we're being tested and there's problems and difficulties, because the purpose of Saturn is to help us to mature so that we learn to handle these things, so that we have wisdom and experience under our belt. And in Aries, it's specifically to help us to get strong, again, to be able to use our energy wisely. That's one of the big ones with Saturn in Aries. And knowing when to act, when not to act. Neptune is all very nebulous. So this is why I was saying about Saturn coming along at the same time is actually quite helpful in some ways. And it's also very magical, because Saturn, as soon as it comes into Aries, of course, it is there with Neptune, both of them on that 0 degrees of Aries. And by the 20th of February, that conjunction between the two of them that they have been dancing around since this time last year, the 19th of February, is when they first started to sort of become aware of one another. They started to come into the orb of the conjunction, but it's only now that it perfects. And it's only one time, one kiss between them as they move over this very important point, the Aries point, the 1st degree of the entire zodiac. So again, not only are Saturn and Neptune themselves beginning a new cycle as they link together, this is seeding a whole new cycle for all of us, because it is on 0 Aries. So we now have a combination of energy that's very contrasting, because Neptune, like I was saying before, it's imaginative and it's spiritual and it has no end. It is very malleable. And Saturn is much more about, this is reality and these are the walls, these are the boundaries, and this is what we need to create. This is what we need to focus on. Stop daydreaming kind of thing. Saturn is very much a planet that speaks of what we can do in reality. And Neptune is what we can dream of. Bring the two together and you have a wonderful manifesting kind of energy. And we have the fire and the drive and the will to actually do it, perhaps a little different from Saturn in Pisces. It also speaks of manifesting your imagination, but maybe I'll just dream about it for another day and then I'll see what I can do. and, trying to deal with the inner demons at the same time. Now we're kind of in a very different realm. Saturn and Neptune are pushing us to realize this vision of a new world. And as I say that, I am just going to drop right here that there's already been a lot of talk in 2025 about the potential for aliens and, whether 3i Atlas is actually some kind of probe. And we don't know yet exactly. It's probably just a comet, but it's so interesting that this discussion has happened. And I've certainly talked about it previously, the potential for alien contact or some kind of communication that tells us that there is indeed someone out there. Is anybody out there? Yes, there is. But then we've also got this energy of new worlds with Neptune and Saturn on the 0 degrees of Aries. Our new world is being built here on planet Earth. But I wonder too, is it speaking about another new world out there that we discover? I don't know. I'm throwing ideas out here because this is what comes to mind when I am tapping into these energies. It's extraordinary and it's extraordinarily powerful. So I think it is important that we listen to Saturn. All of us listen to Saturn. We don't want to be carried away by Neptune's dreams. We need to be very grounded with Saturn, acting with integrity, aligning what we do with our soul's calling and what we know to be right in our hearts. And this is also super, super important. But Saturn in Aries will most likely slow things down because Aries normally moves really quickly. So Saturn slows things down so that we can see what needs to be worked on here. And it is going to speak a lot about personal responsibility, personal commitment. So a lot of working on ourselves while Saturn is in Aries. Now, in between Saturn moving into Aries and forming that conjunction to Neptune, we are going to start eclipse season as well. So the end of February is starting to look quite dynamic. So we're going to have a solar eclipse in Aquarius. This will be on the 17th of February. And this is going to be the first eclipse in Aquarius because the nodes later this year are going to be moving into Leo. So the south node in Leo and the north node moving into Aquarius. They haven't quite got there yet, but there's enough room, there's enough of the orb to just bring this eclipse into Aquarius. So it's right at the end on 28 degrees of Aquarius, and that just means we have a very important new start when it comes to the idea of freedom, liberation, innovation, progress. This is connected to the group, to also technology. So there might be some important technological advancements around this time. But also, of course, as it's an eclipse, sometimes we don't see everything clearly until a little later down the line. And I think this sort of sense of a delay in getting all the information we need is accentuated because we're also going to have a Mercury retrograde land with us at the end of February as well. So this is on the 26th of February. It's going to be a retrograde through Pisces. So this is kind of interesting. It's almost like Neptune and Saturn leave Pisces. Mercury comes along and says, now those two big guys have gone, let's just have a chat. Let's sit down and have a talk about how things are. How are you? Says Mercury in Pisces. This is the voice of the soul asking, how are you? How are you doing here in this area of your life? How are you doing when it comes to uncertainty, your spiritual path, things being a little all over the place? How are you doing when it comes to finding meaning in the chaos? So Mercury is going to begin this retrograde period asking some of these questions. It's very subtle, but maybe it's a little confusing as well. And perhaps, like I say, because it's the middle of eclipse season, it might feel like there's a lot of things that, once again, we don't know or we're kind of feeling, but it's not all come out yet. So needing to have some time for reflection. We then have the lunar eclipse in Virgo, which will tie up some of the themes connected with the South Node in Virgo, which is to do with letting go of perfectionism, letting go of analysis paralysis, letting go of the things that are broken and just not working for us anymore, so that we can be more relaxed, so that we can be more forgiving of ourselves and each other. So that's the North Node in Pisces. So we have a time of culmination around this lunar eclipse in Virgo. Mercury will then station direct on the 20th of March. So we might start to find that the information that we didn't have before, particularly around the eclipses, starts to come through. We then have Saturn sextile to Pluto. So this is going to be on the 28th of March. So it's another one-hit wonder. There's only going to be this one sextile between Saturn and Pluto. And Saturn and Pluto in this connection, we're really being shown here that if we discipline ourselves, if we each take personal responsibility, Saturn, then that is actually going to really help when it comes to the transformation and empowerment of the group, Pluto in Aquarius. Uranus will then go anaretic in Taurus. That's going to be on the 6th of April for 20 days. Uranus will teeter at the end of Taurus on the Weeping Sisters degree. So there might be some unsettled things going on when it comes to the environment, or probably more likely to do with things like stocks and shares and banking. And we could include tariffs in all of that as well, because that has destabilized a lot of the trades. And so Uranus in Taurus has been sort of speaking about all of this. It's been shaking everything up. Now, it did need to be shaken up, but really the higher purpose, remembering that Uranus is more about God mind than human mind, Uranus has been saying, look, you need to change things here because things aren't working, things are stuck, you're not growing anymore. And the more you try to hold on to what you have and sort of, refuse to budge, which is very, very Taurus, then the less free you are, the less resources you have, the more problems there are. So Uranus in Taurus has been really helping us to get unstuck by changing, or asking us to change our values, to upgrade, to use our resources in new ways, maybe to find new resources or new ways of using what we already have that doesn't cause any further damage. So Uranus will hang out on this final degree of Taurus. So all of us will have this anaretic energy in play somewhere in our charts. So the final call is, are you feeling stuck here? Right, you need to do something. You need to change something. You need to try something different. That is always the instruction from Uranus. And then Uranus goes into Gemini. That's on the 26th of April. And as it does that, it brings this wonderful patterned talent triangle back into play. So the talent triangle is, I will take the other planets and aspects off here so you can see it properly. I have shown it before in previous videos, but it's always nice just to see how this pattern looks, to have the visual. So Uranus trine to Pluto, Uranus sextile to Saturn and Neptune. Saturn and Neptune are also sextile to Pluto. So we have this wonderful energy kind of bouncing around these social and transpersonal planets. So Saturn is a social planet, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are the transpersonal planets. So that in itself tells us that there is massive growth coming for our world, for us as a community, as a collective. It is powerful change that is going to flow very quickly, particularly between Uranus and Pluto. So in other words, communications, Uranus and Gemini, are radically changing. Huge technological advancements are going to come very fast. And that is going to create sweeping change with Pluto in Aquarius. And it's going to lead all of us perhaps to question ourselves, to find the meaning in this as things pick up with AI. I mean, we've already had a little taste of that in 2025. If you kind of wonder what was going on with that in 2025, believe me, we're going to be mind blown in 2026 and going forwards. For whilst Uranus is in Gemini, it is all going to rapidly change. So Uranus will be in Gemini until 2033. It's going to start moving out in August of 2032. But until 2033, we're going to have this incredible, liberating, revolutionary, but also sometimes very unstable energy that's running through our communications, how we connect with one another, how we communicate, how we move from one place to the next. It's about transportation as well. Neighborhoods are changing. Neighborhoods are getting upgrades. We've got, of course, all the computing stuff coming in as well. So Uranus and Pluto are going to change everything. And then it's all feeding back into these sextiles to Saturn and Neptune. And out of all the planets, it's Saturn that we can most relate to, because that's the nearest one to the personal planets. And so it is this personal responsibility in dealing with how this is affecting each of us, because we are all going to be affected by these huge changes. And no doubt it's going to lead a lot of us to question our position in society, what we're doing in society, our profession even, as lots and lots of jobs and roles get taken over by AI. And whilst, yes, there's a lot of concerns that can be raised about all these very big changes, I know that in the past, and many of you already know that when we're talking about Neptune and Aries, there are concerns around war, especially with Saturn being there as well. So we know that there are some difficult and challenging sides to these transits, but this pattern also shows us that there is rapid change happening, and that there is a lot of potential for very positive change. In the same way as, we can use the AI for good or evil kind of thing. So let's focus on using it in the most constructive and beneficial ways possible, and how we each can take personal responsibility for what we use and how we consume and what we consume every single day. So Uranus goes into Gemini, and not long after that, about a month later, Chiron will begin to come to the end of its journey through Aries, landing on the anaretic degree of Aries, where things can get very, very urgent, a little bit heated. I just wanted to point out that this is in play right up until the 19th of June. So 28th of May to the 19th of June, Chiron is anaretic in Aries. And so we might be acutely aware of where we feel wounded or not strong enough or not confident enough or not independent enough. And it feels urgent. We've got to fix it right now. Now, yes, Chiron is saying there's some things that need attending to here. If you haven't got to it already, we kind of need to do it now. So yes, it's good to pay attention to what needs to be addressed, but at the same time, we don't want to get into rushing. We don't want to apply a fix so quickly that it ends up breaking just as fast. We don't want to slap a bandage on a wound that really needs more time to heal or to be tended to properly. So just be mindful to give yourself time to address any problems or concerns that come up around this time. Don't let yourself be rushed into making a premature decision or taking premature action. Give yourself the time you need to be able to apply the correct fix. On the 12th of June, I just want to point out Uranus will square the nodes. So this is going to be Uranus in Gemini, of course, squaring the North Node in Pisces, the South Node in Virgo. Uranus is basically pressing us to get past a point where we have been stuck, Try something new when it comes to your communications, says Uranus in Gemini. Try a new way of communicating. Let's bring in some new information. Let's bring in a different perspective. Try switching it around. This is the way Uranus in Gemini works. It's trying to help us to see maybe old information or old teachings in new and different ways. We have to free the mind, Uranus and Gemini. We have to free the mind so we can push past this sticking point or this divide and start to come together as a collective. This is the North Node in Pisces. Instead of kind of separating everything up, Gemini tends to categorize. You are this, I am that. And that's our little boxes. But with Pisces energy, Pisces is, hey, we're all in this together. So Uranus in Gemini is kind of pushing us to recognize that there are different ways of seeing things that will help us to become more united. From here, Chiron will then enter Taurus. So this is a first foray of Chiron going into Taurus. It'll be in Taurus until the 18th of September. It'll go back into Aries and then return to Taurus on the 14th of April 2027. 2033 is when it starts to move out, but 2034 is the end of Chiron in Taurus. So altogether, Chiron will be in Taurus for about 8 years. So wherever Chiron moves, he says there is some healing work that we need to do here. Chiron exposes our wounds, the things that have not been tended to. And so when Chiron comes into a particular house in our chart, it tells us this is what we're going to be working on here. Because once you do the healing work, then it leaves you feeling a lot more whole, a lot stronger. So Chiron in Taurus, for all of us, the very first thing I think of when I look at this transit is that this is about healing the earth. Healing is Chiron and the earth is Taurus, Mother Earth. Taurus can be associated with our agricultural systems and food, and also our banking systems and all our resources. And so this is a time when we are going to have to focus on healing the planet in some way. There's also the idea that maybe our financial systems are sick in some way, that they need fixing, they need addressing. Something has to be brought together. Chiron is a bit of a renegade. Chiron is half man, half horse. So he always speaks of bringing things together in unusual ways, in ways that you didn't think would work before, but they do work. He's quite a maverick. That's very different from Uranus. Uranus is a rebel. So Uranus has the energy of, I'm going to do this because you told me not to. Whereas Chiron is, I'm just doing my own thing. I don't care what you're doing. I'm just going to do what I need to do. And so it's not rebelling against anything. It's not being an upstart. It's just doing what it feels is right. It's also a very shamanic character. And so I feel like there might be a growth in the more shamanic approach to life, to living, because Taurus is also about just how we survive. Chiron here is sort of saying it's a struggle to survive. It's painful. It feels painful to survive. It's difficult. I feel wounded just trying to deal with these basic things to live. Because this is going to be a commonality to a lot of people, Chiron is showing us, okay, so we need to fix that because we don't want that to be ongoing. So it'll make it more and more obvious to the powers that be that something needs to shift in the system. So wherever Chiron is moving in our own personal charts, he's showing us that there's work here that needs to be done so that you feel more secure, because Taurus is always concerned with security. But if you do that work, if you do the healing work that's necessary here, whether that is physical or emotional, financial, mental, however you approach it, it's going to ultimately lead to a more productive life and certainly a life that feels a lot more stable and secure and kind of like it's thriving. On the 29th of June, here we are again at Mercury Retrograde. This retrograde is going to take place in the sign of Cancer. Just noting here that all the retrogrades from Mercury this year are in water signs. So it kind of feels like we're having a lot of time for reflection. We need time to unravel and let our feelings speak to us. Certainly when Mercury is in Cancer, Cancer is ruled by the moon, so we can feel particularly sensitive in this sign. And also Cancer is generally associated with home and family and roots and belonging and our history. So it kind of feels like we need to go backwards to go forwards. We need to go over some old history whilst Mercury is retrograde. We will then come to Jupiter moving into Leo. This is going to be on the 30th of June. And this is going to bring us to quite a critical part of the year, because as Jupiter goes into Leo, it starts to oppose Pluto. Now, technically, we could say that Jupiter has already been in an opposition with Pluto whilst it came to the end of Cancer, but that type of opposition, dissociated, is a little weaker and it takes on much more strength when Jupiter moves into Leo, because it's now properly opposing Pluto. Pluto is in Aquarius. The opposite sign to Aquarius is Leo. So Jupiter moves into Leo, and immediately it is ramping up this Pluto energy, and both of them are squaring Chiron, newly ingressed into Taurus. And this pattern will stay in play until the 9th of August. So that's a T-square, by the way, with Jupiter opposite to Pluto square to Chiron. So this is a particularly stressful pattern. Leo is the sign of drama. It is kings and queens, theatrics. It's look at me. And so Jupiter in Leo is magnifying this energy. It says that there are developments here. There are developments perhaps happening of some kind in royal circles. There's some kind of development when it comes to sovereignty, the idea of sovereignty, because Leo is very proud and it's symbolized by the roaring lion. It is an energy that can sometimes speak of overconfidence, and pride can certainly come before a fall with Jupiter in Leo. Now we can start to see how some of this might be an issue with the opposition to Pluto, who can be very controlling. So it feels like there is massive Jupiter, a massive grab for control, Pluto, that could be harmful with Chiron to the resources, to our planet, to some kind of stability that we rely on. Remember, there are still positive aspects at play at the same time. So I don't think this is kind of, that's it, everything's going to be terrible from here on in. But we're going to go through this period of time during July, basically, where there's a lot of things all happening at the same time. And paying attention to this opposition between Jupiter and Pluto and the square to Chiron, because that is the central core of it. The run of aspects that we have is Jupiter goes into Leo, 30th of June. Jupiter is square to Chiron on the 2nd of July. We then have Uranus sextile Neptune aspects on the 15th of July. So that's been ongoing. We've already had 2 of those. There are another 2 to go. This is an aspect of spiritual awakening. We will have the perfection of Uranus trine Pluto. That's on the 18th of July. So I've already spoken about this aspect, the idea of radical shifts in our communications and technology are stimulating very big transformation in our cities, in our politics, in our technology. in the way that we group ourselves together. Everything is shifting here. There's some high frequency energy coming through here. Jupiter then forms a trine to Neptune. So this is massively increasing either the feeling of confusion with Neptune, because trines sometimes can be a little unwieldy. But then we've also got the potential for some kind of hugely imaginative event that really captures our attention. There's a big, big, big hope that comes in with Jupiter trine to Neptune. Jupiter is also at the same time sextile to Uranus on the 21st of July as well. So as you can see, all of these planets, Saturn's kind of out of it at the moment, but Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Jupiter, all these big planets, and Chiron, they're all kind of interacting with one another. All these stories are rapidly flying around. And then this T-square with Jupiter opposite Pluto square to Chiron says it's kind of really challenging the things that we thought that would stay the same forever. There's a sense that that is what's being rocked because it needs to be. We need to get unstuck, says this pattern. We need to get unstuck, but it's very important that we don't go overboard with Jupiter opposite to Pluto. Sometimes it's a huge amount of wrestling for control because we're afraid of losing money, losing security, and all the things that Chiron in Taurus is telling us about. So July is an incredibly dynamic period of time in the collective, in our own charts. If you've got anything in your charts that is around these early degrees of signs, and I think most of us somewhere are going to have some element of this very strong energy coming into our lives. But like I said before, there's also a lot that we can tap into for help. You know, I'm thinking Jupiter sextile to Uranus whilst it's opposite to Pluto. That invites us to a new, higher understanding. Jupiter is knowledge. He's the big sky god. Uranus is like God mind. So it's almost like through some kind of big opposition, through some kind of fear that we're facing, we're starting to see things so differently now. And it's almost like we're seeing it from above. It's asking us to look at the big picture here, to remember that there is a big picture here. I wonder whether this might correspond with some kind of development with AI. I'm just throwing it out there because of Jupiter sextile to Uranus and the opposition to Pluto and how it might change everything. Let's see what comes. And then right at the end of July, when all of this stuff is going on, then the North Node is going to enter Aquarius and the South Node is going to move into Leo. So this is going to be for around 18 months. And where the nodes go, they show us what is in development and what we need to leave behind. So the South Node in Leo tells us we're moving away from this Leo energy, which has that sort of look at me kind of feature to it. It's very much a sign that wants to be recognized and wants to be revered, wants to be honored in some way. There's nothing wrong with Leo energy, but we are kind of looking at the negative side of it because we're looking at the South Node in Leo. So the worst ways that Leo can manifest is again about pride. It's about being arrogant and I know everything and I'm better than you. And also it can just be very, very overly generous and just a bit too much, a bit too loud. But the best of Leo is kind of tapping into our inner child and keeping that light within ourselves. And that's what we can use. That's what we can tap into and put forward to the North Node in Aquarius. We can recognize that every single one of us is a star, Leo, but we also have to work together as a collective, as a group. This is the North Node in Aquarius. The group is what matters. Yes, we are all individuals, Leo, but we've got to find a way to work together because we are in this together. And then the North Node in Aquarius says we need to develop Aquarius traits, which is about not taking things so personally. It's about distancing ourselves, sort of stepping back, being more objective, being more air. So air is intellectual. So we need to get ourselves informed about things. We need to have informed discussions and debate rather than sort of shout everybody down, which is what Leo can sometimes do. So we're all developing these Aquarius traits. Wherever the North Node is moving in your own chart, it's time to develop these traits of Aquarius, asking questions, asking for feedback, finding kindred spirits, because Aquarius is also about friendship as well, and realizing that this is what helps us to grow. We can't just do everything on our own, which sometimes Leo can be a little bit like that. The fire signs generally can be a little bit like that. So again, even with the nodes, there is a lot of focus on the collective experience and finding better ways to work together. We're then going to have the first of the eclipses in Leo. So that's going to be on the 12th of August. So that's going to give an important new start in our Leo house. Sometimes the eclipses in Leo can bring news about kings or royalty or people who are very much in the public eye. So there might be some events going on that kind of come out of the blue. And then on the 28th of August, there will be a lunar eclipse in Pisces, which will bring this series of eclipses in Pisces to an end because the nodes have now moved on to Leo and Aquarius. So there's an important culmination in our Pisces house. Pisces themes are generally associated with the unconscious, our spirituality, what's going on in our imagination, what is meaningful to us. So this eclipse is going to bring us to a conclusion in these kinds of matters. Now, after the eclipse season, it feels like the rest of the year is almost like a climb down from the huge amount of stuff that was going on in the middle of the year. So I really do feel like this is a year of two halves. The massive shifts that take place during the first 6 months of the year seem to go through this peak during July when everything is happening, everything is kicking off between all the planets, and there's some great aspects going on and there's some really tense aspects going on, and it's all just kind of this huge melting pot of experience. And then we have the eclipses. And then suddenly, it's almost like it runs out of steam. That's what I'm sort of feeling like. It's like it runs out of steam, which is good. We probably are going to need a bit of a rest after all that's been going on. There are still a few major movements, but it's not quite as intense as it has been. So 31st of August, we will have a nice trine between Jupiter and Saturn. This feels very stabilizing. Jupiter has started to get away from Pluto's influence now. It's got away from Neptune. So now we have our stabilizers back on with Saturn. And really it just says, if you take responsibility, if you commit wherever Saturn is moving in your chart, taking personal responsibility, committing yourself, just working hard here, that is going to give you an opportunity to develop wherever Jupiter is moving in your own chart and to take up on opportunities for growth. Certainly Jupiter in Leo, I meant to say earlier, wherever it's happening in your own chart, it's encouraging you to be more you, to be more courageous, to shine your light. Yes, there's a lot of complicated aspects going on with Pluto and Chiron and all the rest of it. But generally speaking, Jupiter is saying, put your crown on. Remember that you are sovereign here. The South Node's influence at the same time is just saying, don't get overconfident. Don't do things because you just want attention from others. Create from your heart. That's Jupiter in Leo. Create from your heart rather than to please the audience, which the South Node in Leo kind of alludes to. So Jupiter trine Saturn is a lovely aspect that just starts to help us to see that there is growth happening. And then on the 18th of September, Chiron will go back into Aries to finish up that journey in Aries. So it's just going to go backwards. Of course, it'll be anaretic for a while on that final degree of Aries, bringing back that concern about trying to fix things really quickly. So remember what I said before. We need to be patient. We need to not rush the fixes, but just acknowledge where we're feeling pressed to do something, but take our time to identify what the best action is. And then this is going to be even more important because we're then going to move into a very reflective period with Venus and Mercury retrograde. So Venus goes retrograde in Scorpio on the 3rd of October. Mercury goes retrograde in Scorpio on the 24th of October. So they're both going to retrograde through Scorpio. But Venus will actually back into Libra. So half of her retrograde will be in Scorpio and the other half will be in Libra. Either way, we have got an enormous amount of focus once again on our feelings, our deepest feelings, our fears in Scorpio, what's going on underneath everything. We're once again asking questions about shared resources. We're asking questions about who to trust, who to invest in, like physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. So all of these questions are coming up, and then Venus going back into Libra as part of that retrograde will also talk about how fairly we feel we're being treated, how equal we are in our relationships of all kinds, not just our sort of romantic relationships, but all kinds of relationships. And certainly Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is going to bring up a lot of questions about what we know, what we think we know, whether we are communicating at a really deep level, whether we are trusting enough to be able to volunteer information. So there's a lot of introspection around this time. We then have on the 12th of November, whilst these planets are in retrograde motion, Jupiter will conjoin the South Node. This is super important because Mars is also going to be there as well. And the Sun will be at the bending of the nodes. In other words, the Sun is square to the nodes. So I'll show you on the screen here so you can see it clearly. The big conjunction with Jupiter and Mars. Mars agitates, Mars brings things to life, Mars animates things on that South Node. So there is something big, maybe there is some kind of big battle, big conflict that we're letting go of. And that could be on a world stage type situation, or maybe it's just something in our own lives that we are letting go of something that was once a really big goal, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. It doesn't seem right anymore, or we're just letting go of it because we've run out of steam and it doesn't seem so important anymore. And then the Sun being square to the nodal axis, often this can actually manifest as some tensions out there in the world. Sometimes it's to do with weather or natural events. Other times it's people events. It's people that are causing some kind of issue. So there is a bit of tension around this particular period, just as Venus and Mercury are starting to get to their station points. Mercury stations direct on the 13th of November, so it's just the day after Jupiter conjuncts the South Node, with Mars hanging around there as well. And then Venus will station direct on the 14th of November. And you can see how close these aspects are with Mars and Jupiter in the South Node, and then the Sun up there in Scorpio as well. So this is the one period in the second half of the year where we do have some tension to navigate. And maybe some of that tension and that release of tension might also center around letting go of a certain way of seeing things, letting go of a certain belief or philosophy, because that's also Jupiter. Sometimes it is just the way that we've been looking at things that blocks us, that stops us, that makes us feel as though we can't achieve anything with Mars. So maybe we realize that we've been just fighting the wrong battle here, or, fighting to win the wrong race. It's time to let that all go so that we can apply our energies to something that we believe in. On the 29th of November, we will have Uranus trine to Pluto. So this is now the second of 5 trines. I didn't mention that before. 5 trines between Uranus and Pluto. So the first one we just had on the 18th of July. The last one we will have on the 10th of May, 2028. So we have 5 visits of Uranus trine Pluto, which, as I was saying before, is bringing together these stories of innovation and progress around our communications and trying to free the mind and change the way that we communicate. And that is going to help to facilitate this big transformation when it comes to our groups and our politics and the way that we work together with Pluto in Aquarius. And then the final aspect of the year is on the 2nd of December. And this is when Jupiter in Leo will trine Chiron, now back in Aries. So I think this is a really nice aspect to finish on, because to me it suggests that we're brought back to a place where we can see why we've been doing all this healing work, and we can see that we're stronger and we have a better understanding of ourselves. Jupiter trine Chiron is increasing the benefits that come from the healing process. And for some people, it might actually manifest as some kind of opportunity opens up because of all the storms you've weathered, because of all the things that you've suffered, because of everything that you've been through. It's a wonderful aspect of teaching and mentoring and learning. Both these characters are associated with wisdom. So if nothing else, I think we are going to learn a huge amount in 2026, and it will be beneficial for our growth. This concludes my reading for 2026. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do click a like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell if you'd like to be notified of the month ahead readings, as well as the other ad hoc readings that I put here on YouTube. If you would like to hear more from me, I do have Patreon, Substack, a website. All my links will be below. I also write a daily post for social media, so you might want to check that out. Again, links are below. I wish you all the best for 2026. I will see you again soon, and in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.